Hey guys, and welcome back to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. Life from the perspective of a military family member is way different than a civilian standpoint. Military children and family members give up their hopes and dreams to be able to stand by and support their service member, and it isn't an easy lifestyle for anyone to live. I hope that this podcast is able to help connect the military community and give others just a glimpse into what the military life is like from the perspective of spouses and children.
Hi everyone, welcome to Grace of a Military Child in Life podcast. I am here today with Caleb to hear more of his story and what it was like growing up as a military child. So hi Caleb, welcome to the podcast. Tell me a little bit about your parent who served, what branch, things like that, and what it was like growing up military.
So my father, Sergeant Lloyd Sawyer, who is now medically retired, was originally a civilian funeral director before he ever joined the Army, and he did that probably into his 30s, and after 9/11 he wanted to get into the Army, and so around 2004 my father joined the Army as in a mortuary affairs unit, completed basic at the age of 34.
Wow.
He then went on to serve a 6-month tour in Iraq, responded to 2 mass casualty events, processed over 200 bodies in Iraq, and returned with severe PTSD and traumatic brain injury, and was later medically retired by the Army. And so I never really moved around a lot. I was born in eastern North Carolina in a little town called Belhaven, like 2 traffic lights. But when my dad joined the Army, when I was about to turn 5, it was that Christmas we moved up to Colonial Heights, Virginia, next to Fort Lee, and I started kindergarten there the following year. We never moved again after that, because after my dad's first deployment, he was not doing well, and so he was shortly retired, and so I never had the whole keep moving around all the time experience. But yeah. Yeah.
So did you go to school on base then when you moved up to Virginia? Did you start there or did you go public?
No, I went to the Colonial Heights public school system. We had 3 elementary schools, and I went to the big one with like 500 students. And it was a good time.
Yeah.
I loved all my teachers, and I got a pretty good education.
Yeah. Was there a lot of military kids there as well, being outside of the base, or?
There were some. I wouldn't necessarily say a lot. I would say there were probably more students on base or in some of the other surrounding areas. For some reason, there just wasn't a place that a lot of military kids went.
Yeah. Yeah, because some bases, like when I lived in Fort Sam in Texas, you had the schools on base, but then the surrounding schools off base were just filled with military kids too. There was also like 3 bases. There was Joint Base San Antonio, so Randolph. I'm blanking on the other name, but then another Air Force base, and then Fort Sam. And so there were 3 bases kind of in close proximity to each other. So there was just military kids all over the place. So kind of growing up then, because you didn't really, grow up fully immersed in the military life for a long period of time. What was it like kind of growing up and, feeling the effects of the military, throughout your entire life then?
I had actually regularly been to kind of like the funeral home before my dad ever joined the Army. I had a very interesting perspective on life as someone who saw a decent number of dead bodies as a child.
Right.
And my dad joining the military, we moved, and I had that kind of idealization of him of like my dad has joined the Army. Cool.
Yeah. You were so young too that it was at that point I would be like, oh my gosh, this is like so cool, and it's a different lifestyle for sure.
But then since he kind of got bad so fast, I remember spending one Christmas, probably around second or third grade, where at that point they had committed him to the hospital. And so I spent Christmas at the hotel next to, what was it? Not Walter Reed.
Bethesda?
No, I can't remember the name of the hospital. But yeah, I think he ended up committed for 6 weeks at that point. I think he went back for more time later, and it was it hit him really hard.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of time taking care of my dad, and there was a little bit of like me and my brother being on my own a little bit more, and staying quiet around the house because he was kind of always in a high stress position. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, of course. How old were you around that time?
I was 7, 8.
Yeah.
Sometime around then. And I have a younger brother who's 19 months younger than me, but that's more of what the only thing he remembers is that's just how it always was.
Yeah. So you kind of remember
Yeah.
the before, during, and like the after effects of it all because you're a little older.
Yep.
Yeah. I have a sister who's 15 months younger than me, so kind of very similar. And like I was 9 when my dad got hurt, and so she was 8. But because, I mean, we were both a little older, so we kind of remember a lot of what happened. But I remember so much more than she does, just because of those 15 months age gap, and you know the way we both aged and everything, and how we both remember things and all of that. And it's weird how just a little age gap between siblings can be so different when looking back at the past and remembering. So it can be strange.
Yeah.
What was it like kind of growing up then in that kind of environment, and then, you know, going out into the real world and, you know, experiencing, you know, even just during school, like what was that like, kind of the home versus, you know, outside life?
It was kind of weird. For me, it was always just kind of like, this is how my life is.
Yeah, it was normal.
And I never really thought about it as much in high school.
Yeah.
But by the time that I got to my freshman year of college, like it kind of started to click, like, this isn't everyone else's normal.
Right. But because you grew up in it for
Yeah.
so long, it was your normal. That's what you were used to.
I went from, like, probably living the most high stress that I ever want to be to college being breeze in comparison.
Yeah.
I love my family and we have a great life, but it definitely had its stresses.
Yeah.
And I definitely wasn't as aware of them then as I am now, which is probably for the better.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely like every like families that go through these traumatic situations that, you know, are not favorable, but they do happen. I think, you know, being so young in these situations has its benefits because, you know, it just becomes our normal.
Yeah. It's
not, you know, we don't have to make these changes, like huge changes, you know, as we would as teenagers and stuff like that. But rather we grow up in it, but then you hit, you know, adulthood and you look back and you're like, oh, you know, not every family does this like we do, or, you know, things like that. And so it can be a little strange. What was the transition then, like from that to college? Did you live at home still? Did you move out? Did you kind of have a huge click, like you had said, of this is, you know, my life has to change now?
So I was living in Colonial Heights next to Fort Lee all the way from kindergarten through high school. Graduated from Colonial Heights High School. I went on to Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I was kind of just going through my first week of classes on my own, not looking forward to my... Actually, no, at that point I was definitely looking forward to 8 a.m. multivariable calculus Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Not many people look forward to that.
Well, it was just because I had been used to getting up at 6 every morning to go to high school, and I was like, oh, I get to sleep in until 7? Oh, this is great.
That's huge. An extra hour of sleep.
Yeah, and I kind of went through that first week of classes, and I just realized that there weren't all these high stress moments. It was just like, I'm just going to class.
Yeah.
And I went back to my room, and there was no one to talk to. For my first 2 weeks, I didn't have a roommate.
Oh, wow.
I was just, I guess he had signed up to come, and they had put his name on the door to be my roommate in my double, and he never showed up.
Oh.
So I had an empty bed in
Changed
my double.
His mind.
and so I kind of had a week or two there where I just had a lot of time to sit and think to myself and, kind of reflect. And I watched and I saw all the other things that everyone was doing, and, they felt like they could go do whatever, whenever. And I was kind of like, what? No, I have to be doing something. And but it finally clicked that, like, at a certain point I had done all my homework and there was just nothing to do. And so I was like, well, I guess I'd go do all these other normal things.
Yeah, because what do you do once everything's done? You have nothing left to do.
There's no like all the appointments that like everyone needed to make it to, and we all needed to work our schedules together to figure it all out, and figuring out what time we were all going to have dinner together. I had this very weird moment of independence where I was just like, oh, well, guess this is how it is now.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. So I still live at home, and I'm going into my senior year. I lived at home freshman, sophomore, and I kind of skipped over 1 year. I don't know which year I skipped over, but I skipped over one of them. And I lived at home for the last 2 years of college, and it's definitely weird still to an extent, because I'm going to school, I'm doing, like, I have an internship, I have, like, all of this stuff that I'm actually doing myself, and then, balancing that with family and everything going on at home. So it's definitely weird and definitely a challenge to balance everything. But I think it would definitely be, I'd have like that moment of, okay, well, there's nothing to do now. If I were to live somewhere else, that moment of confusion of, okay, everything's done now, it's quiet, I get lonely. I get really lonely. I was lonely last night in the hotel room by myself. I was like, well, what do I do? There's no one for me to talk to. Everyone's asleep. What do I do? Yeah. So I definitely think it would be, because we go from this high stress life to essentially a low stress life. Moving along, and then it's like, okay, low stress. How do we do this? So it's definitely, I can see that being a challenge for sure. So what kind of things then did you, I guess, fill your time with? Did you look at, I would be one to take more classes. Like, did you kind of balance that out to figure out how to adapt your high stress lifestyle to more of a lower stress, or?
Yeah, so I was always very much an academic kid.
Yep.
That's me. Was going to college was really fun for me. Go Deeks. I took 17 hours my first semester, which they had warned me against. I was taking, like they said, only take 2 STEM classes, and I was taking Chem 1, Physics 1 honors, and multivariable calculus. And I was like, still running out of work.
And those are some intense classes too.
Yeah, and so finally just had to go make some friends. Find people to go out to eat with, hang out, do all the fun, like, things people associate with doing at college other than class.
Because everyone looks at college and they're like, oh, it's this party life. Like, there's so many things to do. It's so exciting. It's independence. It's, there's parties, there's games, there's, all of this stuff. I'm very academic. I took 16 hours my first semester, 17 my second. I take, full loads over the summer.
Yeah.
Like, I do everything. And everyone's like, how do you do that and not go to parties? And I'm like, I just don't,
Yeah.
So it's definitely, you have to be like, okay, hold on. I'm done with all my classwork. I have to go make friends now.
Yeah.
I have to have a social life too. So it's balancing all of that together.
But yeah, after my first semester, I had started, feeling around where my place on campus was. I had made some friends. Had some really good times with some great professors. My next semester, I started looking into getting into research because I knew walking in that I wanted to study statistics and physics, and that I wanted to go on to get my PhD in something. I wasn't quite as clear on like what I wanted to do, but
well, you don't have to be that early in college either.
But I knew that my goal was I wanted to go on, get my PhD, and I wanted to have some kind of like professorship position. That's kind of my dream job.
Mm-hmm.
And so my second semester, freshman year, I started talking to one of my TAs about getting on a research project with her. And so I started spending some extra time learning how to work on the project that she was working on for her dissertation. I started playing D&D with some friends. That was a great time. One of the most fun activities I've ever done. But I started trying to pick up like the kind of extracurricular things as opposed to adding too many classes. I think I did take 19 hours my second semester freshman year, but it was only because your freshman year classes are the easier ones to take.
Oh,
so you want to knock
simple.
out the gen eds and stuff so that you can take less hours later on.
Well, and that's when it gets fun too. A lot of people look at the gen eds and they're like, oh my goodness, there's so much I can choose from and I can pick different options and then I can choose my major. And like, already knowing what you want to major in, you're like, all right, let's get these classes out of the way. They're kind of boring and let's move on to the fun stuff.
Yeah, I was very fortunate in that I correctly guessed what I wanted to do.
Well, that's good.
The classes that I went on to take were the classes that I wanted to do. I got lucky and got it first try.
Yeah.
And now I'm a physicist, technically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but yeah, I worked for 3 years on a research project with COVID kind of getting in the way in the middle of it.
COVID ruined a lot.
Yeah. But I ended up with a lot of time getting to do research, getting to know a lot of my professors very personally.
Mm-hmm.
And that ultimately set me up for then going on and doing some more research at the Associated Hospital with the university. I got published on a research paper back in December.
Wow.
And I am headed on to USF for my PhD in medical physics.
Wow.
So, got a lot done.
Yeah, that's incredible. And USF is like 2 hours away from me.
Oh, awesome.
I love it down there. It's a beautiful campus. But yeah, it's so insane, like just the amount of sheer work that you can get done in so short of time when you actually kind of have that plan in mind. And when the plan doesn't change.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, when the plan changes, a lot changes. I went in saying exercise science. I was going to be an athletic trainer. I was going to work for the WWE. I had this huge plan, and then slowly it started to change. And so now it's all like, okay, my bachelor's in health science, my minor's in marketing, but I'm going on for a master's in marketing and want nothing to do with health. So, like, things change, and it's crazy how things change. But tell me a little bit, because we're in Alexandria with No Greater Sacrifice, and so obviously you are related to No Greater Sacrifice as well. So tell me kind of how you got involved with No Greater Sacrifice and how they helped support you through your college journey and how they still continue to support you, because let's be real, they're a family.
Yeah.
And once you're in it, you can't really leave.
No, you're in it.
You're in it
for life.
Exactly, which is nice, because
Yes.
let me tell you, not a lot of people are like that. But yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
So My mom knew about NGS through spending a lot of time taking care of my dad, testifying on Capitol Hill. She got into a lot of inner circles and got to meet a lot of people. And so she could probably say more about how she exactly heard about NGS, but then she was like, Caleb, you're applying to this.
Yeah.
You need a scholarship. You need a scholarship. It's amazing. They have gotten me through my 4-year degree debt-free. And I got financial aid from the college. I got help from some other scholarships too, and No Greater Sacrifice put forward a lot of money to help me go to my dream school and get the degrees I wanted, and I'm continuing on to do my dream job. And it wasn't an easy ask either.
Yeah.
Cost of attendance for this upcoming year, just for the year at Wake Forest University, is $83,000.
Oh my goodness. Is that out-of-state tuition or in-state?
So it's private, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yep. And I mean, you get what you pay for.
Right.
The biggest class I ever had was 32 students.
Yeah, and my classes are like 64. I have a couple in the 30s, but they're like 64 or more students.
I had several classes with 3 or less students.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And I had personal access to all my professors pretty much around the clock.
And that makes a world of a difference,
It does. It's huge. That wasn't even the reason I actually initially picked it. So I applied early decision. I locked in my decision as my senior year of high school. I knew I was going there by the end of October. And so I was, just kind of relaxing throughout the rest of my senior year of high school. But the guy in the info session, when I first went to tour, and I had been telling my mom, like, oh, it'll just be another college tour, whatever.
Yeah.
And he said, you only have to take like a freshman year's worth of like gen ed classes, and you can take your like literature class in whatever like department you want. And I'm a big classics guy, and I didn't really like my English classes necessarily in high school. I just didn't like that literature. And so he said, you don't have to take an English class, and I was like, sold. That's it. Where do I sign up? I'll figure the money out. But I'm coming here.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just those little itsy bitsy things that you're like, okay, I'm sold. This is where I'm going.
And I fell in love. It was a beautiful campus and everything.
Yeah.
I received so much support from everyone there, and it's been a great experience.
Yeah.
And I owe that all to No Greater Sacrifice. I could not have gone without their support.
Yeah. It's a club you never want to be a part of, as Rebecca always says.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, it's a great club to be in.
Yeah.
It's a great club to be in. We love No Greater Sacrifice and all they do, and it's incredible.
Absolutely.
All the work they put in to make dreams happen.
They do.
So it's really incredible. My last question I always like to ask is, what advice would you give to another military child? It's like the hardest question ever, but what advice would you give?
This is a tough one.
I know. And I always hit people with it at the very end.
Always keep your chin up.
Yep.
Definitely start looking for scholarships.
There's a ton out there, let me tell you.
Do what you really want to do. A lot of people have made a lot of sacrifices to enable that. And so you should take advantage and follow what you want to do in life. Because you can't necessarily do that everywhere else. And it's a privilege here.
Yeah, for sure. It's great. And it sometimes feels, at least for me I didn't do anything to get all of this. My dad did. I didn't do anything, but it's all like handed to me. And I'm like, okay, well, I didn't work for this. but so many people have made sacrifices before us, and now we have access to it all. And it's incredible that we have access to all of it, and we can, go to college debt-free, live our dreams, and actually do it.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your journey and everything that goes along with the military life. And thank you
so much for having me.
Yes, of course.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Grace of a Military Child and Life. Make sure to set a reminder for every Tuesday to listen to a new episode. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Grace of a Military Child and Life. If you have any questions or want to be on the podcast, send a message to one of our social media platforms or email grace.of.a.military.child@gmail.com. See you next week.